All right, diving into Jain philosophy today, you sent over some pretty in-depth academic excerpts. Looks like you want to really grasp the core ideas.
Definitely a rich tradition. Lots to unpack.
Yeah, and one thing that really caught my eye was this whole concept of Tirthankaras.
Ah, yes.
These like super evolved beings who've achieved liberation and then, get this, help others do the same.
It's a core concept in Jainism, the idea that someone's walked the path and can show you the way. But before we get to the Tirthankars themselves, we should understand what they're guiding people toward.
Which is?
Liberation or moksha, freedom from the cycle of birth and death.
Right, the excerpts mentioned that. But honestly, all these terms are kind of swirling around in my head.
Understandable. There's a lot to take in.
So can we unpack that a bit? What exactly is and Arianta?
Well, the ultimate goal in Jainism is to break free from that cycle of birth and death, to achieve moksha. But what keeps us stuck? Jainism says it's our inner enemy.
Inner enemy.
Things like anger, ego, deceit, greed. And Arihanta is someone who has conquered those. They've become a victor, a Jina.
So not just being a good person, but actively overcoming these negative forces within. That's pretty intense.
It is a demanding path, but the texts describe Arihantas as having incredible qualities. They can see everything past, present, future.
Like omniscience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they give amazing sermons. People naturally worship them, drawn to their wisdom and purity.
It's like they become this like beacon of knowledge and enlightenment. But wait, if they're so evolved, why bother coming back to teach others? Wouldn't they just move on to this ultimate bliss?
Great question. It gets to the heart of Jain philosophy. Compassion is key. And Arianta, even though they've achieved liberation, they still feel deep empathy for others who are struggling.
So they want to help.
Yeah.
Guide others out of the darkness.
You could say that. They pay it forward, sharing their wisdom, so others don't have to suffer as they did.
Okay, that makes sense. Now back to the Tirthankaras. You said they're the ultimate spiritual guides. But are they all Arihantas?
Yes, all Tirthankars are Arihantas, but what makes them special is they don't just live out their enlightenment, in some secluded paradise.
Right.
They actively choose to come back, to teach others the path to moksha, like guiding lights, showing how to conquer those inner enemies we were talking about.
So the ultimate role models.
Yeah.
Showing us what's possible. The excerpts mention cyclical eras, too. How does that fit in?
Jain cosmology describes these vast cycles of time, with periods of progress and decline. During each cycle, 24 souls achieve this incredible status of Tirthankara.
So it's like a cosmic schedule. Yeah. With 24 enlightened beings appearing to guide humanity.
Incredible. But are these Tirthankaras just mythical figures? Or did they actually exist?
That's where it gets really interesting, because you provided some information on Lord Mahavira.
The 24th Tirthankar.
Yes, the 24th and final Tirthankara of this era. He lived in India around the 6th century BCE.
So there's historical evidence. There is. And what's fascinating is the context surrounding his birth. India at that time was grappling with all sorts of societal issues, the rigid caste system, the prevalence of animal sacrifices.
Sounds like a time ripe for some serious spiritual reform.
Exactly. And Mahavira's teachings directly address these issues, offering a path toward liberation that transcended those societal divisions. Even stories from his childhood hint at his extraordinary nature. He was known for his incredible fearlessness, even in the face of danger.
Like what? Any specific examples that really show this?
Look, there are these tales of him encountering dangerous creatures, snakes, even monsters, but he remained calm, unfazed by the threat. It's like he understood, even as a child, that true fearlessness comes from conquering those inner enemies, not from battling external threats.
Wow. So even as a child, he was living out those principles. No wonder he became known as Mahavira. Great hero.
Exactly. And his teachings resonated with people. He talked about the cycle of birth and death, the role of karma, how our actions have consequences, and how to break free from this cycle by conquering our passions.
Sounds kind of familiar. But how did he propose people actually achieve this? Did he advocate for, like, total seclusion, meditating in a cave?
While meditation is part of Jain practice, Mahavira emphasized ethical living as the path to liberation. He laid out 5 great vows known as the Mahavratas. And these weren't just suggestions, they were serious commitments.
Okay, so these great vows. They seem pretty intense. Do all Jains have to follow them strictly? Or is there some flexibility?
There are different levels of adherence, depending on whether you're a monk or a layperson. For monks and nuns, those vows are incredibly strict. Lives of austerity and dedication, eating only once a day, walking barefoot, owning very little.
That sounds challenging, to say the least.
It is a demanding path. But for those seeking liberation, it's seen as a way to purify the soul, break free from attachment to material things. For lay people, there are modified versions of these vows known as anavratas. They adapt the principles to everyday life, making them more practical.
So there's a path for everyone, regardless of their life circumstances. That makes sense. But what are these vows, specifically?
Well, the first, and arguably the most important, is ahimsa, which means nonviolence.
Ah, yes. Ahimsa.
This extends to all living beings, not just humans. It's where the Jain commitment to vegetarianism comes from. Then there's satya, meaning truthfulness, asteya, non-stealing, brahmacharya, celibacy, and aparigraha, non-possession.
Wow. So that's, let me see, nonviolence, truthfulness, not stealing, celibacy, and non-possession.
That's right. And to refine conduct even further, there are additional guidelines called gunavratas and shikshavratas.
Okay. Lots to unpack there. But let's go back to ahimsa for a moment. It seems like that one gets a lot of attention, even in the main Jain symbol.
Yes. It's a cornerstone of Jain philosophy,
Right.
more than just a dietary choice. It influences everything from how Jains treat animals to their environmental practices.
This is where it gets really relevant to today's world. We're facing issues like climate change, animal welfare, the need for sustainable living. Ahimsa speaks to those directly.
It does, and it's fascinating. Jain texts were discussing the environmental impact of our choices centuries ago. They talk about how eating meat puts a strain on resources like water and land, and how it can contribute to suffering, not just for the animals, but for the planet itself. They even mention this book called Diet for a New America.
Diet for a New America. Interesting. Might be a good deep dive for another time.
Yeah.
But sticking with ahimsa, what else do these texts say about its practical application?
Well, they have this fascinating classification of living beings based on the number of senses they have.
Oh, right, like the five senses?
The idea is causing harm to a being with more senses is a greater sin because they experience the world more fully. Their suffering is more intense.
So a five-sense creature, like a human, would be considered more evolved than, say, a plant.
Exactly. This plays into their strict vegetarianism. Harming an animal with five senses is seen as causing significant suffering.
Okay, it's all starting to connect. But what about insects? They have senses too.
It's a constant effort to minimize harm. They have practices like straining water to avoid accidentally swallowing small creatures. They're aware of the impact of their actions, even on the tiniest of beings.
Wow, it's dedication. So I'm sensing a recurring theme here. Jainism seems to be all about recognizing the interconnectedness of everything, how our actions ripple outward, like a spiritual butterfly effect.
That's a great way to put it. And this interconnectedness is really apparent in their understanding of the four realms of existence, where we can be reborn, and the concept of reincarnation.
Right. The texts mention four realms: heavenly beings, humans, animals, and plants, and hellish beings. And it's our karma, the actions we take, that determine where we end up.
Exactly.
But what makes the human realm so special?
The texts emphasize that being born human is a unique opportunity for achieving liberation.
How so?
We have the capacity for thought, for self-restraint, for spiritual seeking, which the other realms lack. It's like we're in the perfect position to break free.
So it's almost like we've been given this precious gift, this chance to escape the cycle.
Exactly. And to do that, Jainism outlines a specific path, cultivating right perception, right knowledge, and right conduct, known as the three jewels.
Okay, these three jewels sound important. Can we unpack each of those a bit?
Absolutely. Samyak Darshan, right perception, is about seeing the world through a Jain lens, having faith in the teachings.
Got it.
That leads to Samyagnen, right knowledge, understanding the true nature of the universe and ourselves. And that's where these 9 tattvas come in.
9 tattvas. What are those exactly?
Think of them as fundamental principles. They explain how karma works, like a set of cosmic laws that govern existence. The first 6 are key to understanding the cycle of birth and death. We have the soul, Jeev, and everything that isn't a soul, the Jeev. Then there's punya and pap, representing good and bad deeds.
So punya would be like helping someone in need, and pap would be, I don't know, telling a lie.
You got it. But it's not always black and white. The texts give some thought-provoking examples to illustrate the nuances of intention. They talk about a surgeon using a knife to save a patient, and a burglar using a knife to harm a victim.
Interesting comparison. The action is the same, but the intention is completely different.
Exactly. It's not just the action itself, but the motivation behind it that matters. Jain philosophy is full of these intricate details. Even a simple act can have complex karmic consequences.
That's fascinating. Makes you think twice about your motivations.
It does. And then there are the remaining tattvas, the ones related to the influx and bondage of karma.
Right. So how do those fit in?
So esrava is the process of how our actions, driven by intentions, create these karmic particles that attach to our souls.
Oh, okay.
And bandha is the state of being bound by those particles, stuck in the cycle.
So it's almost like our actions create this spiritual residue that clings to us and shapes our future.
That's a good way to think about it. And that brings us to the final element of the three jewels, samyak charitra, or right conduct. This is where we take all that understanding, right perception, right knowledge, and put it into action.
So this is where the rubber meets the road. Walking the walk.
Exactly. Right conduct is about living in accordance with Jain principles, adhering to the vows, practicing nonviolence, striving to purify our thoughts and actions, moving towards that ultimate goal of liberation.
Okay, so it's all L connected. Right perception leads to right knowledge, which guides right conduct.
Yeah.
Like a spiritual recipe for moksha.
You got it. It's a beautiful and intricate system, and we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in terms of how Jains put these principles into practice, how they navigate everyday life, and what that path to liberation looks like.
And I'm ready to dive deeper.
Yeah.
But maybe we should pause here for a moment. There's a lot to take in.
Okay.
I think I've caught my breath. That was a lot of information just on the core principles of Jainism.
It's a rich tradition.
It is. But it's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually, and another to actually see how they're lived out in practice.
Right.
The excerpts also mentioned Jain festivals.
Ah, yes.
Do those play a role?
Absolutely. Jain festivals are more than just celebrations. They're opportunities to actually put these principles into action, to deepen understanding, and to connect with the community.
So it's a way to bring these ancient teachings to life, make them relevant in the here and now.
Exactly. And one of the most important festivals is Paryushana Mahaparva. It's an annual observance. Lasts for 8 days in the Svetambar tradition and 10 days in the Digambar tradition.
Okay, Paryushana Mahaparva. What's the focus there?
Well, it typically falls during the monsoon season, when Jains traditionally focus on spiritual reflection and self-discipline.
So like a retreat. Time to turn inward.
You could say that. A key practice during Paryushana is Pratikraman.
Pratikraman.
It's a ritual of self-reflection and repentance.
Okay, repentance. So are we talking like public confession of all your wrongdoings?
Not necessarily. It's more about cultivating humility, recognizing that we're not perfect, and that our actions have an impact.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility and striving to do better.
That takes courage to really look at yourself honestly and admit your shortcomings.
It does, but it's also incredibly liberating to be able to let go of guilt and shame, to start fresh, commit to living more ethically. And during Paryushana, this emphasis on forgiveness and compassion extends even further.
How so?
Jains seek forgiveness not just from people they've wronged, but from all living creatures they may have harmed.
Wow. They're basically extending their circle of compassion to the whole web of life.
It's a profound expression of ahimsa in action. And on the final day of Paryushana, known as Samvatsari, there's a special emphasis on seeking forgiveness from individuals, people they may have wronged personally.
So a time for reconciliation, mending broken relationships, powerful practice, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
So much division and conflict.
It is. And there's this beautiful mantra they use for seeking forgiveness, Kshamevirasya Pushanam Shamevayani Michimemi Dukadam, which essentially means to ask for forgiveness is a great quality of the brave ones, and if I have committed any mistake, knowingly or unknowingly, I ask for your forgiveness.
It's amazing how this one festival, Paryushana, it just encapsulates so many of the key principles. Ahimsa, the interconnectedness, the importance of personal accountability, and forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's not just a celebration, it's a practice, a way of life.
You've hit the nail on the head. And it's not the only festival that brings these principles to life. Another major one is Mahavir Janma Kalyanak,
Which celebrates.
the birth of Lord Mahavira.
Right, the great hero himself. This one sounds a bit more celebratory, maybe a little less introspective.
It is a joyous occasion, filled with processions, devotional songs, lectures on Mahavira's teachings. It's a time to remember his message of nonviolence, compassion, the pursuit of liberation.
Beautiful way to honor his legacy and to inspire others to follow in his footsteps.
Exactly. These festivals aren't just about the past. They're about bringing these teachings into the present, into our everyday lives.
It's like a reminder to keep striving, keep working towards that inner transformation that Mahavira embodied.
You got it. And speaking of transformation, the excerpts you provided also go into this fascinating concept of leshas.
Yes, the Leshias. It sounded a little complex at first glance, but I'm intrigued.
They are complex, but also fascinating.
Remind me what those are again.
Essentially, leshis are states of mind,
Okay.
but they're also described as colors of energy that reflect our inner state. There are 6, each associated with specific behaviors and karmic consequences. It's like a spectrum of awareness ranging from the darkest to the purest state of being.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with the breakdown. What are the 6?
Right. The darkest one, the most negative, is called the Krishna Lesha, which is black, characterized by anger, violence, jealousy, a lack of compassion.
So if you're imagining someone driven by rage, consumed by negative emotions, acting out in harmful ways,
That's Krishna Lesha in action.
yikes. Doesn't sound like a fun place to be. And what happens if someone dies in that state?
It's believed that dying in the Krishna Lesha leads to rebirth in hell, a realm of intense suffering. It highlights those serious karmic consequences of dwelling in such a negative state.
Intense. Really underscores the importance of, working on those inner enemies we talked about earlier.
It does.
What's next on this Lesha spectrum?
The next one is the Neel Lesha, which is blue, a step up from black, but still pretty negative. This is where pride, arrogance, laziness, deceit reside. Think of someone who's constantly lying, manipulating others, avoiding any kind of spiritual growth.
Still a pretty dark place to be, even if it's not as extreme as the Black Lesha.
Right.
Karmic consequences of this one.
Dying in the Neel Lesha can lead to rebirth as a one-sensed being, like a plant or microorganism.
Okay, so lower realm of existence. Limited awareness.
Right.
So it seems like we're seeing a pattern here. The lower Leshas lead to lower rebirths.
They're catching on.
What about the middle ground? Is there a Lesha that's just like average? An average state of being?
Yeah, that would be the Kapat Lesha, which is gray. It's a state of sadness, gloom, vindictiveness. People in this Lesha tend to be fault-finding, easily agitated, lacking in mental balance.
So like stuck in a negative mindset, constantly focusing on what's wrong, holding grudges, blaming others.
Exactly. Inner turmoil that can manifest in a lot of unhealthy behaviors.
Right. And if someone dies in this gray Lesha?
They're often reborn as birds or animals.
Okay. Still a lower realm, but a step up.
Right.
It seems like the consequences are becoming less severe as we move up this ladder.
That's right.
But we're still in pretty negative territory. When do we start to see some, positive qualities emerge?
That happens with the Tejo Lesha, which is red.
Red. Okay.
This is a more active, passionate state, but it's still driven by ego, greed, and attachment. Think of someone who's ambitious, driven, but primarily motivated by self-interest, or the desire for recognition. They might be generous, helpful, but there's often a hidden agenda.
So their heart's not fully in it. Their actions might look good, but
The intentions aren't pure.
what happens if you die in this state?
Dying in the Tejo Lesha can still lead to rebirth in lower realms.
Even though it's a step in the right direction.
It is. But it highlights the importance of purifying our intentions, moving beyond selfish motivations.
Not enough to just do good deeds. It's about the mindset, the heart space.
Exactly.
Okay, feeling like we're getting closer to the good stuff now. What's the next Lesha?
That would be the Padma Lesha, which is yellow. It represents a state of increasing purity, peace, and tranquility.
Okay, yellow.
People in this Lesha tend to be calm, compassionate, less attached to material possessions. They're genuinely kind and helpful. Their actions come from a place of genuine care and concern for others.
Now that sounds lovely, like they're radiating goodness, emanating positive energy. Seems like we're finally moving into the realm of, like, spiritual growth, enlightenment.
You can see that.
What happens if you die in the Padma Lesha?
They're likely to be reborn as humans or heavenly beings.
Higher realm.
Greater happiness, knowledge, spiritual understanding.
Okay, so we reached the top of the ladder. What's the final state? The ultimate goal?
That would be the Shukalesha, which is white. It represents the purest state of mind, a state of complete liberation.
White. Okay.
People in the Shukalesha embody those highest Jain ideals. Unwavering commitment to nonviolence, truthfulness, detachment. They're free from anger, ego, greed. They radiate peace, serenity, wisdom.
Wow. That sounds like a truly enlightened state, like they've achieved spiritual mastery.
It's the ultimate goal of Jain practice. And if someone dies in this perfected state of mind, they achieve liberation, moksha, freedom from the cycle of birth and death. It's a state of pure bliss, infinite knowledge, perfect peace.
So the Shukalesha is like the gateway to liberation. But how do we actually move through these leshyas? Is it possible to shift from, say, the Kapot Lesha, the gray one,
Yeah.
to the Padma Lesha, the yellow?
That is a great question. Our leshyas are constantly fluctuating, influenced by our thoughts, emotions, actions. But through conscious effort, through spiritual practice, we can cultivate those more positive states of mind.
So it's not like you're stuck in one leshya forever.
Right.
You have the power to change, to evolve, to move towards that white light of the Shukalesha.
Exactly.
That's encouraging. But what are some, practical things we can do to shift our lesha?
Well, the excerpts mention this practice called bhavana, which means reflection or contemplation.
Oh, Vada.
There are 5 main bhavanas, each focusing on a different aspect of Jain philosophy and practice.
5 pavanas. Okay, I'm intrigued. What are they?
All right. The first is anicca bhavana, which is reflection on impermanence.
Impermanence. Okay.
It's about recognizing that everything is constantly changing. Nothing lasts forever. And this can help us detach from our attachment to things that don't really matter.
So like a reminder to let go of the need to control,
Mm-hmm.
to accept the ebb and flow.
Yeah.
That sounds helpful for detaching from those negative emotions that can, keep you stuck in the lower leshyas.
Exactly.
What's the next pavana?
The next one is asharana bhavana, which is reflection on solitude. It's about spending time alone, cultivating inner peace and independence.
Solitude. I can see how that would be challenging in today's world,
Yeah.
but also incredibly valuable, like disconnecting from those external distractions and really tuning into your own inner wisdom.
Precisely. Then we have samsara bhavana, which is reflection on the cycle of existence. It's about contemplating that endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and how our actions create the karma that keeps us spinning through it.
That's a pretty sobering thought, but also a powerful motivator to make choices that lead to a better rebirth or even better liberation from the cycle altogether. What's the next one?
The next one is akattva bhavana, which is reflection on the oneness of all souls. It's about recognizing that interconnectedness, that we're all part of this vast web of life, and that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for everyone and everything around us.
That's a beautiful concept. It's like the Jain version of the Golden Rule. Treat others as you would want to be treated. It fosters compassion, empathy, a sense of shared responsibility for the well-being of all.
Exactly. And finally, we have dharma bhavana, which is reflection on the true religion.
Dharma Phavana.
It's about contemplating the teachings of Jainism, deepening one's understanding of the path to liberation, and committing to living in accordance with these principles.
So a daily reaffirmation of your faith, your spiritual goals, aligning your actions with your beliefs.
Yeah,
Walking the talk.
you got it. And to further support these 5 main bhavanas, there are 4 auxiliary bhavanas: Maitri bhavana, Pramod bhavana, Karuna bhavana, and Madhyastha bhavana.
Wow. 4 more. It's like a whole toolkit for cultivating a positive state of mind.
It is.
What are those about?
Maitri bhavana is about cultivating loving kindness and goodwill towards all beings. Pramod bhavana is about appreciating the virtues and accomplishments of others without jealousy or envy. Karuna bhavana emphasizes compassion and a willingness to help those who are suffering. And Madhyastha bhavana encourages us to maintain a balanced, equanimous state of mind, even when things are tough.
That's incredible. It's like a recipe for inner peace and happiness. By practicing these bhavanas, you're basically training your mind to be more compassionate, understanding, and resilient.
Exactly. It's about consciously shaping our inner world
Yeah.
in a way that aligns with those higher leshyas, those states of being that lead to greater peace, wisdom, and ultimately liberation.
I'm seeing how it all fits together now. The rituals, the festivals, the practices, the virtues, even the leshyas. It all contributes to that ultimate goal of moksha, like a beautifully intricate tapestry woven with threads of wisdom, compassion, self-discipline.
You've captured it beautifully. And while we've covered a lot of ground, there's still more to explore.
I know. Feels like we've just begun to unravel the mysteries of this fascinating tradition.
We have.
But I'm already feeling like so much richer for having taken this journey.
Me too.
But before we jump into the final part of our deep dive, can we touch on something we briefly mentioned earlier, the Digambar tradition?
Yes.
The excerpts mention 6 essential observances specific to this tradition.
Right.
Can you explain those?
Of course. These 6 observances are Devalpuja, Guru Pasti, Swatya, Sanyam, Tapa, and Pratyakyanpachaka.
Okay, that's quite a mouthful. Can we break those down a bit?
Certainly. Devapuja is about praying to and appreciating the qualities of the 24 Tirthankaras. Gurupasti is about showing devotion and service to one's spiritual teacher, or guru. Swadhyaya is about studying the Jain scriptures. Sanyam is about self-restraint, particularly adhering to the householder's vows with discipline. Tapa, as we discussed, involves various forms of austerities. And Pratyekyanpachaka involves renouncing certain activities or foods for a specific period to cultivate discipline and detachment.
Wow. It's like a comprehensive approach to spiritual growth, encompassing devotion, study, self-discipline, renunciation.
Exactly. These 6 observances provide a practical framework for living a Jain life, a life that leads towards liberation. And it's fascinating how they connect back to so many of the core principles we've already explored. The importance of the Tirthankaras, the role of spiritual teachers, the study of scriptures, the practice of austerities, and the cultivation of self-restraint.
It's all so beautifully interconnected, isn't it? Just like that web of life we were talking about earlier.
It is. And in the final part of our deep dive, we can explore how these principles and practices can be applied to our modern lives, even if we're not Jain.
That's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to see how these, ancient teachings can be incredibly relevant and helpful in navigating the complexities of today's world.
They are.
Wow. Jain philosophy is pretty mind-blowing.
It is a rich tradition.
From liberation to leshyas and those 6 observances in the Digambar tradition, my head is spinning.
Lots to unpack for sure.
But now I'm curious, how do these ancient teachings apply to our modern lives? Even if we're not Jain.
It's remarkable how relevant these principles still are. Take ahimsa, for example, nonviolence. We often think of diet, but it goes way beyond that.
Right. It's about how we treat ourselves, others, the environment.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a mindset of peace, compassion, and respect in every aspect of life.
And in today's world, with so much conflict, practicing ahimsa almost feels like a radical act.
It is, in a sense, making conscious choices for a more peaceful way of being. Think about how often we're harmful without even realizing it. Gossiping, judging, holding on to anger.
That's true. It's like we're surrounded by messages that encourage competition and aggression.
Choosing ahimsa to cultivate kindness and understanding, yeah, it's almost revolutionary.
It is, and you're not saying to be passive or weak.
Oh,
Right.
no, not at all. It's about channeling your energy towards harmony and well-being. Think about the environmental crisis. Ahimsa encourages us to consider the impact of our choices. What we buy, what we eat, how we travel, on the planet and everyone on it.
There's that interconnectedness again. Our actions have consequences.
Exactly. Ahimsa recognizes that we're part of something bigger, and we should make choices that reflect that.
I'm also thinking about leshyas. Understanding those different states of mind could be incredibly helpful for, navigating modern life.
Absolutely. It's like a roadmap to your inner world.
Ooh, a roadmap. I like that.
By becoming aware of the leshyas, you can see the patterns in your own thoughts and actions, and then you can make conscious choices to shift towards more positive states.
So if you find yourself getting caught up in anger, jealousy, you're like, okay, I'm in the Krishna Leshya right now. Time to shift.
Right, and that might involve practicing forgiveness, cultivating gratitude, doing things that bring you joy, maybe spending time in nature.
Finding tools to cultivate more of the Padma Lesha, that yellow light.
Oh, yeah.
I love that. It's like we have this internal guidance system. If we pay attention to those subtle shifts in energy, we can create a more positive internal world.
That's the power of Jain philosophy. It doesn't just describe the human condition. It gives you tools for transformation, moving towards peace, wisdom, fulfillment.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. It's incredible how teachings from centuries ago can still be so relevant today.
It's the beauty of exploring these traditions. We discover that the human experience, the challenges, the longings, they're universal.
They are. And this wisdom that's been passed down, it can guide us all, no matter who we are.
Exactly.
Well, this has been inspiring. I'm definitely going to explore these concepts further, especially the Pavanas. I can see how incorporating those reflections could, shift my perspective, maybe even create more inner peace.
That's wonderful. Remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Making small, consistent efforts to align your thoughts, words, and actions with those higher principles. Cultivating a way of being that reflects compassion, understanding, respect for all life.
That's a beautiful message, a journey we can all take. Thank you so much for guiding us through this exploration of Jain philosophy.
It's been my pleasure. Keep diving deep and see what wisdom you discover.
And to everyone listening, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep learning, and until next time, keep diving deep.